Taoiseach, yesterday's Irish Independent raised significant new questions regarding the ODCE, their handling of the controversial Sean Fitzpatrick trial, which was the longest-running criminal trial in the history of the state. The public reaction to the case was a feeling of being utterly let down. People read what happened in the courts, rightly or wrongly, as another case of people with friends in high places, and the sense of punishment only being for the little people. In a week where the public debate rages regarding the operation of our courts and judiciary, it must be said that cases such as the Fitzpatrick case have a significant impact on public confidence in the system as a whole. I want to raise with you what appears to be significant conflict in the information provided to both myself and the Irish Independent by the Department recently when compared to information provided to my colleague, Deputy Roisin Shortall, in November 2015. Yesterday's revelations in the Irish Independent seem to suggest that the ODCE effectively misled the Department of Enterprise and therefore Government too regarding their ability or lack of ability to effectively investigate the Fitzpatrick case and provide the DPP with the evidence required to prosecute. On the 31st of May this year, I received a reply from the then Minister for Jobs. That reply assured me that in 2011, the Secretary-General of two departments, Justice and Enterprise, had met the ODCE officials and offered extra resources if needed for investigation. The reply went on to say that the ODCE had claimed that they had no need for any extra resources. The reply clearly says that it was emphasised at the meeting that any request for resources would be responded to positively. The reply confirms that the ODCE stressed they were satisfied with the resources that were available to them. Yet, in the reply to my colleague Deputy Shortall in November 2015, it was claimed that the ODCE had flagged the need for further resources within their office. Subsequent replies relating to that question indicate that there was a significant delay in meeting those resource requests. That's obviously a significant issue in its own right. The Irish Independent claims that the email sent internally from Mr O'Connell in 2011 about concerns regarding the lack of resources within the ODCE to pursue the Fitzpatrick investigation were only forwarded to the Department of Jobs within the last few weeks, and we need to know if that's true. We know that Mr O'Connell had, during the course of the investigation, shredded key documents and had also engaged in coaching witnesses, and that ultimately, that and other issues ultimately led to the controversial collapse of the case. The questions I want to ask are, can you explain the conflict between the Department of Jobs' reply in May of this year to me and the same department's reply to my colleague Deputy Shortall in November of 2015? Does the Taoiseach worry that the ODCE may have concealed vital information from the outset regarding their ability to pursue the Fitzpatrick investigation? And does the Taoiseach believe the Government was misled by the Office of the Director of Corporate Enforcement?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Thank you, Deputy. I haven't seen the report. It hasn't gone to Cabinet. It hasn't been published yet. I understand that parts of it may have appeared in a newspaper, but I don't know to what extent they are the truth or they are the full truth. The report has now gone to the Attorney-General, and the Attorney-General has to consider whether it needs to be redacted because, of course, individuals appear in the report and they may need to have their good name protected. But once the Attorney-General has dealt with the report, we will then publish it if we're permitted to do so, and we'll publish it with the response. And at that point, I think it will be possible for the Taoiseach to answer your questions in more detail. What I can say is that the Office of Director of Corporate Enforcement, the ODCE, has got additional resources in the last year. Indeed, the office has got several additional staff, and I think too often in this country a lack of resources is used as an excuse for poor performance, which is why so often additional resources don't make any difference in terms of outcomes and performance. And what I read in the papers is that documents were shredded that shouldn't have been shredded, and witnesses were coached who shouldn't have been coached. I don't know how a lack of resources causes someone to shred a document they shouldn't have, or to find the time to coach a witness they shouldn't have coached. So I think we need more and more, as government opposition, not to allow people to hide behind the excuse of resources. It isn't always the reason as to why everything goes wrong. Often it's not the reason at all. As a government and as a Taoiseach, I've expressed my view very clearly that I don't think that our capacity to respond to white-collar crime and corporate fraud is adequate, and for that reason I've asked Minister Fitzgerald and Minister Flanagan to work together with their departments to develop a package of measures to go to Cabinet by the end of September, which will enable us to strengthen and deepen our response to white-collar crime, to corporate fraud. And I think that's necessary. I think people demand it. And I think if we have any chance of restoring confidence in the state's ability to deal with such issues, we need to do exactly that.
Deputy Murphy.
Taoiseach, I know the report is gone to the AG. It wasn't the question I asked. I asked a question in relation to a conflict between two questions, the same broad question that was posed to the same department, where we got two different replies, two different responses. In 2013, the department were made aware that the documents were shredded. 2013, and that was just before the trial commenced. And I'm sure that same information would have gone to the DPP. And would we have had the longest-running criminal trial in the history of the state if they had that information? I asked you very specific information. The question that when it was posed in 2013, we were told that, well, the reply I got said that if resources were requested, they would be provided. When I compare that to the reply that Deputy Shortall got when she posed the question in 2013 and had to follow it up with other questions, you could, in relation to how many staff were there, when it was going to be augmented. It took a very long time. In fact, I think it took until last year before they had their full complement of staff. So that's 2 years. Now, I asked you very specific questions in relation to how you can resolve that conflict. That's an issue in its own right, irrespective of a report going to the AG, where you have a department that tells you two different things. Both of them can't be right because they're the opposite end of the spectrum. Could you please address that issue, and do you have confidence or do you believe that you were misled by the Office of the Director of Corporate Enforcement?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
I don't have an answer to that question. I haven't had any dealings yet with the Office of the Director of Corporate Enforcement, so I can't say they've misled me, because certainly I haven't had no dealings with them as Taoiseach in the last 11 days, and I didn't in my previous briefs either. So I don't believe they've misled me, but if you have a question to ask to a line minister, I imagine you'll do that in the normal way. In relation to resources, in April 2013, a revised workforce plan was submitted by the ODCE, identifying the need for 5 accountants and an IT expert. That requirement subsequently grew to 7 accountants, and notwithstanding the moratorium on recruitment in place at the time, the Department secured sanction from the Department of Public Expenditure for recruitment in October 2014. A campaign was launched in November 2015 under the auspices of the Public Appointment Service, and after the normal recruitment processes were undertaken, a panel of 8 forensic accountants was established. From April through to July 2016, 5 forensic accountants were formally recruited for the office. The remaining panellists withdrew. The Department subsequently asked PAS to run a specialist competition to allow it to recruit 2 more investigators to bring the cadre to 7, and that campaign is currently in process.
Taoiseach, that concludes Leaders' questions.